Thank you all for being here. Um, this event is the first event, the first annual event. We are hoping to capitalize on this and hopefully um, build that organization and move forward. My name is Dr. Ali Ismaili. I serve as a dean for mathematics, science, IT, information technology, and bachelor's degree program, and university relation and transfer and articulation, and other duties as assigned. This is just piece of it. At STC, it's not just a job; it's an adventure, and we learn over the years that you have to be jack of all the trade. In the beginning of the college, I even served as custodial, but I was administrator because we didn't have enough custodial. Carry the furniture in the classroom, stuff like that. But today, one of our bachelor degree program, Bachelor of Applied Technology in Technology Management, with under the leadership of Dr. Flores, Ruben Flores, hosted this gathering. And hopefully, with the help of other programs, we're going to expand this. And I want to welcome you here, but I want to let our president, Dr. Solis, officially welcome you all. He was reading some of the agenda, and he was very impressed. And hopefully, we're going to impress him more, because I was impressed with your presentation rehearsal. It was just outstanding. That's why I came back to learn more in detail and all the videos that you all have to show us. Dr. Solis, come on down, please. Give a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Ruben, and welcome. Most importantly, welcome to you to South Texas College. I'm Ricardo Solis. I'm, I guess, the new president of South Texas College, the second president. I'm here. This is my 9th month, almost, and it's been a phenomenal experience and a great journey to be here. Actually, to come back to the Valley. I was president in Laredo College for almost 6 years, but originally I'm from the Valley, born in Brownsville, raised in Mexico, primarily in Matamoros, right on the border, and my mother, by the way, is from here, from McAllen area, born here, and my father's from Matamoros. So they met at the University of Texas at Austin, and that's how I became, I guess. And but on my mother's side, there's also some interesting history. You heard from not only from the Vales on my mother's side, but on my grandfather's side, Baker, A.Y. Baker, G.P. Baker. That was from my grandfather's side. And so that's long history from the 1890s, 1900s, I believe. Y'all probably know the exact dates but there were some personalities and back on my grandfather's side. And but it's great to be here. And this is such an exciting time for South Texas College, because we are here providing opportunities through innovation, creativity, and partnerships. And as you probably know, lately has been a phenomenal few months for South Texas College, especially not only in the technology and the partnerships that we're doing with industry and being part of bringing industry, but also with Mexico. We're now going to be doing what no other college has done ever. And that is doing direct training with the maquiladoras, with the big companies that are coming down to the area. And also the dual credit. I'm sure you heard about the dual credit. We're one of the #1 college in the dual credit, working at the high school, providing credit to students from the 9th grade. And on the other big side is on the health. Probably heard how now South Texas College is one of the largest health providers. We have 12 programs in the health, 2-year programs. That is the trend now. And I'm always saying that because that is where higher education is going due to the demand of industry, short-term careers, diplomas, and certificates. And more importantly, our nursing program. We are the largest nursing providers of all the community colleges in the state of Texas. We graduated a combined LVN and RN of 468 nurses last year. That's an incredible record to meet the needs. And I'm sorry I know I'm taking valuable time, And I was here to only give they told me one minute welcome, but yeah, I cannot hold back. I gotta, besides, this is my college, so give me another minute. So anyway, so this is what we're here for, to provide, to meet the needs of our students and our citizens. And we're very excited because now we are becoming so relevant, especially due to the demands of industry, as I mentioned. That is where we're all going to be going. We're going to see that's going to be the solution. And you're going to see that, especially with the pandemic, now that the students, as you are probably aware, they are staying home. And unfortunately, we're still under our high, and that's everywhere in South Texas, actually in the United States. There's still thousands and thousands of students. And in our case, there's about 2,000 students that we normally have that are not at the UT, they're nowhere. They're staying at home. The pandemic affected many people, not only health-wise, but mentally, and some financial, of course, as well, which is why we have upped our financials in allowing free tuition for everybody. So that's going to be all of us collectively to make sure, because we obviously, you know, that education is the answer to the viability of economic of a region. So that's why we're very excited about it. And all of us collectively are going to have to make sure that we get those students back and to get them back to higher education, which is why we're doing short-term careers to get them in, get them a certificate, be it technology, welding, or even to health, to cybersecurity. We have over 100 programs. So that is what we're going to be doing. That's what I need everyone to help us to get these students back and to give them a viable career. And then later they can go on and to matriculate into the universities if necessary. But fortunately now, industry, all they require is these 2-year specialized degrees for anything. And that is where we're going. And then, of course, we hope that they continue coming back. And that's where we're all, it's all about upskilling and reskilling. With that said, again, thank you for coming here. And you're going to have a great presentation here. Looking forward to learning a lot about the history of McAllen. And again, thank you for coming to South Texas College. Enjoy.
Once again, can a round of applause for Dr. Solis? All right, so thank you, Dr. Solis. Welcome to everybody. Y bienvenidos to here, the South Texas College Cooper Center for Performing Arts, and as well those who are tuning in via a live stream. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Rene Ballesteros. I work at the Museum of South Texas History as the Community Engagement Officer in Edinburgh, Texas. I've been there since 2009. And personally, myself, I remember growing up here in McAllen and playing soccer with the McAllen Youth Soccer Association at the fields that used to be right here behind STC, right? I grew up there playing soccer, and personally as well, I took some classes here in this college, and it helped me on my way to get my bachelor's at UT Pan Am. So I feel very connected with this area. I very much feel at home, and myself, you all, we're all going to learn a lot more about the context of this great city that we live and work in. So I'm honored to be serving as moderator for tonight's Historic Moments in Business, A Diverse Experience panel presentation. Tonight's presentation will share the rich history and personal experiences of the McAllen business community through diversity and many different perspectives. Before we get started, I really would like to express my appreciation for the Bachelor of Applied Technology and Operations Management program and the hard work of Dr. Ruben Flores and the team, including the program manager, academic coaches, education technology, and information technology team. Can we get a round of applause for all their hard work? Yes. Yes, their hard work helped make this happen. So now, if I may also please ask the live audience to take a second to silence your cell phones and any mobile devices. I would also like to remind everybody that we will have a Q&A at the end of the panel presentation. So once all the panelists speaks, we'll go to the crowd. We'll also go to the live stream. So if you have any questions in the chat of the live stream, you're welcome to add them throughout the presentation. And with time allowing, we'll do our best to address as many as possible. So tonight's features panelists are Dr. Ruben Flores, who will discuss the history of Hispanic-owned businesses as well as other businesses in McAllen, Aziz Showery, owner of Showery Insurance and Financial Services, and Nashla Showery, of Showery Family Enterprises. They'll discuss the history of the Lebanese community and their businesses. Also Rosalie Weisfeld with MW Fruit Company, Weisfeld Properties Incorporated, and the Sarah Ellen and Samuel Weisfeld Children's Family Partnerships. She will discuss the Jewish business community in McAllen. After that, we will have a brief intermission, let everybody stretch a little bit, and then we'll come back and hear from Gerry Garcia, the Vice President of Special Projects and Government Affairs at the McAllen Chamber of Commerce. She will give us a history of the McAllen Chamber. And finally, last but not least, Mark Garcia, the Executive Vice President of the McAllen Economic Development Corporation, will present the history of that as well. So we do have a lot lined up. Briefly, Dr. Flores did ask me to briefly give an overview, a history of McAllen and the greater Rio Grande Valley. So I'm going to do this as brief as possible before we get to our panelists. So kind of go back in time with me, and people have certainly been trading and doing business in this region since time immemorial. There's evidence of occupation of our area by First Peoples going back 10,000 years or more. That includes evidence of trade and technology innovation at historic sites like Sal del Rey, the Outbluffs in Roma. We see these evidence. Now, with European exploration, as time went on, and our area became sought after and a contested territory. In 1746, the Spanish crown charged José de Escandón with surveying and colonizing the area between today's Rio Pánuco in Mexico and the Guadalupe River in today's Texas. Escandón was the first governor of Nuevo Santander, which was this greater area, and founded communities including Camargo, Reynosa, Mier, Revilla, Laredo. They were all known as Las Villas del Norte. At that time, survival was very dependent on trade, and goods from ranching flowed out of the region, including wool, leather, and much more. Now, as decades passed, the ownership of this area saw a whirlwind of change. If you were living in the McAllen area in the early 1800s, your nationality changed from Spanish to Mexican to Texan to United States citizen to Confederate and back to American, all in 50 years. That was all in someone's lifetime. During these tumultuous times, people from all over the world traveled through the borderlands region and produced and traded goods like cotton, fabrics, and even traded armaments and much more. That all brings us to the beginning of the 20th century, when the expansion of the railroad system and seaports opened South Texas and northeastern Mexico to the world. In 1904, the Hidalgo and San Miguel extension of the St. Louis, Brownsville, and Mexico Railway reached the Santa Anita Ranch, owned by John and James McAllen. On December 5th, 1904, that same year, the McAllen Town Site Company was formed, and the city was officially incorporated in 1911. Ranching the land as an economic driver began to be displaced by ambitious investors who had a future vision of industrial agriculture, and we saw that. Thus, the moniker of the Magic Valley was marketed to investors in the north as a place of plentiful water, fertile soils, and cheap labor. Now, towns along those railroads popped up across the valley, and railroad depots then became the centers of commerce for farmers and the communities that grew around them. Through time, McAllen, the Rio Grande Valley, and its surrounding borderlands have been a place of refuge, opportunity, and prosperity, as well as the crossroads of heritage and innovation for the world today. We are honored to be sharing some of those stories today. Thank you, and please help me in welcoming our first panelist, Dr. Ruben Flores, a McAllen native who serves as the program chair for the Bachelor of Applied Technology and Operations Management here in South Texas. Thank you.
Mr. Ballesteros, thank you. So you might ask yourself, why is a program that is about business doing a history project, right? Well, it's very important as we teach our students to embrace education, to embrace learning, knowledge. But beyond that, it's very important to rise up by embracing entrepreneurship. And this is what this is all about today. We have people on this panel who will be talking about their families coming in and creating something from nothing, creating a business in the early 1900s, and many of those businesses still surviving until today. And this is why it's so important to have these lessons for our students, telling them that they themselves can rise up, build something so that their families can be taken care of and they can succeed as entrepreneurs. And that is why we are doing this today. So let me ask you all, do you all love this country? Right? This country, one nation, right? Indivisible, right? No matter what, this country will stand. With what? Oh, I'm sorry. Under what? Under God. Right? And then with justice, right? With liberty, I'm sorry, and justice for all. We have freedom in this country. And we can find equal justice in this country. And what we want to go ahead and put forward to our students is to understand that in this country, anything is possible. That you can work with your hands and create something and be able to move your family forward to succeed in your life. That's what we want to talk about. But we also wanted to make sure that we were able to tell them what this area was like back in the day, because many of them don't understand the history of businesses that were laid here and so on. Maybe you all say, well, maybe if we were in yesteryear when everything was so simple, you know, we yearn for those years, right? But for those of y'all that understand the Valley's history, was it like that in the early 1900s? Or was it a different way? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because I want to take you back to that time. And tell you a couple of stories that actually happened here. One of them had to do with an Hidalgo County judge. His name was H.T. McCabe. He was removed from office in 1890, right before we talked about the railroad coming in, right? And in his place was put a man by the name of Max Stein, who was appointed Hidalgo County judge in his place. So, was he happy with what happened? He took several prominent men that were his supporters. They armed themselves and they gathered a group of people. They planned to seize the county records from what then was the county seat, Hidalgo, Texas, and move those records into Mexico. The citizens of Hidalgo, Texas, and county officials fought them and kept them from taking those records south. McCabe, and in the process of doing so, McCabe was shot in the leg. McCabe and his group fled into Mexico. They were in Reynosa. And they started plotting to assassinate those that put Max Stein in power. McCabe found out that Mr. Stein and some of his friends intended to attend a fiesta in Reynosa, in the town plaza. Stein and his group were at the theater enjoying a play. Mr. McCabe had sent his 18-year-old wife to go to that same fiesta. She sat right behind the party, the Stein party. When the play was over, they proceeded over back to the plaza. She followed them. One of the members of the Stein party turned around and said, "Do you want to speak to Judge Stein?" And she said, "No, no, no. I'm feeling a bit sick. Could I have somebody from the Junior family take me back home?" The Juniors were a business family from what was then Chapin, later became Edinburgh, Texas. So they went over to tell Mr. Stein what she had asked. He went over to talk to Mr. Junior. When he was doing that, she went over to him, pulled out a gun, .44 caliber, and shot him in the head, killing him. She was arrested and placed in a jail in Matamoros, Texas. Sorry, Tamaulipas. And this is when another person that was involved in Hidalgo County at the time, was originally from Rio Grande City. He was a county commissioner. His name was Dr. Alexander Headley. Many people called him El Doctor Canoso because he had a white beard, white hair. He went around different places in this area, took care of the sick, and a lot of people really felt indebted and really liked him. He put together a plan to break Ms. McCabe out of jail. He rode into Matamoros. He had paid some people inside the jail to take her to a window in the second floor, and he told her to jump down. She did so, breaking her ankle. He put her on a horse. They took off. The posse went after them. They kept riding for 3 days. They ended up in Alice, Texas, where they were arrested. They were both charged. He was eventually released. She was waiting to be sent back to Mexico on extradition. She fought the extradition, and eventually the federal court ruled in her favor, and she was released. She never answered for that crime south of the border. Okay? Just a little bit of a taste of how things were back then. Okay? How many of y'all have ever heard of Rio Rico, Texas? It was south of Mercedes. In 1906, the American Rio Grande Land and Irrigation Company owned the tract of land south of Mercedes. It was known as the Orcon tract. Located on this tract was Rio Rico, Texas. The owners of the company were concerned that the Rio Grande River would shift its course, leaving a new irrigation pump they had set up, a pump station, high and dry. Under the cover of darkness, they used dynamite. They blasted through a piece of land. Okay, and so when they were through and they strained out the river, Rio Rico, Texas, ended up in Mexico. Okay, so the residents in Rio Rico were known as the Lost Americans, the Forgotten Americans. But then one day, Homero Cantu Treviño walked into an Edinburgh, Texas law office owned by a lawyer, McDonald. He wanted to inquire about his immigration status, getting papers and so on. And after hearing his story, McDonald told him, as far as I'm concerned, based on what you're telling me, you're an American citizen already. So they filed, and after the litigation, Cantu was declared an American citizen by interim decision number 2748 in Hidalgo County. You know that everybody in Rio Rico then said, hey, we're leaving this town, we're going to America, and we're citizens, so we're going to go live there, right? And that's what happened. So 2 interesting stories to tell you about the climate and what it was like in the early 1900s here in this area. Okay, so I wanted to show you McAllen as it was back in 1916. Everybody can see the picture up there, right? So if you look at number 1 there on the screen, number 1 is what later on was going to be Archer Park. Okay. Number 2, right across from there, was a park that was full of deer. It was called the Deer Park. 2 years later, in 1918, the construction of what we know as Casa de Palmas Hotel, right, was placed there. If you look at number 3 way down there, number 3 is where there was a county road that went all the way into Reynosa, Tamaulipas. That county road later became 10th Street in McAllen. If you look at number 4, that road later became Broadway Street. So you can get a good reference. Number 5 at that time, I guess you know where I'm going now, right? Number 5 at that time was called Palm Boulevard, but later became Main Street. If you look at number 6 here, a lot of people know 23rd Street as Depot Road, right? Back in the day. The original depot was there, the train depot. They moved it to where number 6 is now. Number 6 burned down. And where number 10 is now, that was the train station, the train depot at that time. Number 7 in this picture was the first car dealership, and they didn't say Dale Gas, right? But they said this was the first car dealership in McAllen. It was owned by our second mayor, O.P. Archer, and it was a Studebaker dealership. Number 7. Number 8, way back there, guess what that is? If anybody that lived here a long time ago in McAllen remembers the old high school right there, right on, I guess if it's 11th Street or 12th Street, I don't remember but correctly, but that's the old high school. There was a stadium next to it many years ago that was all torn down, and now it's a bank, right? But that was the old high school. If you look at number 14, right near it, that was the first school ever built here in McAllen. All the kids went there. When they built that new high school, then they ended up moving all the elementary kids to the first floor of that high school, number 8, and all the high school students all the way up to 11th grade went to school in the top floor. Number 9, you all are familiar with the church that's right across from what their bank, that Chase Bank. Well, that was the first Presbyterian church here in McAllen, number 9. I've already went over number 10. In a minute, we'll talk about the soldiers that were here. Okay, thank you. And so those soldiers were that was a canteen for them, and I just been told I have 5 minutes, so I'm gonna have to go forward on this. But just some highlights in this slide before we move on to the next one. I think we're, oh yes, number 24 down there. That was the Sacred Heart Catholic Church. It was a wooden building then. It burned down. Later on, it was reconstructed into what it looks like now. All those numbers between 27 through 41 back there, those were all soldier encampments. We had a total of 12,000 soldiers encamped here. More than the, in 1918, we had about 3,000 population here. We had more soldiers here than we had residents. I mean, it was a real boost to the economy here. I really think it laid the foundation for the economy. Number 37 there is the largest house in McAllen at the time, and that belonged to the Gerrys. And then their business was number 32 there that we'll see in a minute. So I'm going to go forward on here since the time is, so this was the first building in McAllen, the Cantina La Esmeralda. I guess they wanted to drink, right? And here are the Guerras, D. Guerra and Sons. Diodoro Guerra used to be a sheriff in Rio Grande City. He came over here to join his sons to put together a business. They call it D. Guerra and Sons. Enrique, Modesto, and Jose, they were, his sons were city commissioners here. There's his, they established that business in 1912. You'll see that building now as El Patio restaurant, right? That's how it looked inside. The Velas. Salvador Vela came from Mier, married Leonor Zamora Reynosa. They had 8 children, the eldest being Jose Pedro. In turn, he married Sinforiana Villarreal, and they also had 8 children. His son, Amado Vela I, was Justice of the Peace here. His son, Amado Vela II, was one of the signers of the petition to incorporate McAllen. And today in this room, we have one of his descendants, okay? So, and then we had Moises Vela, who set up a meat market. We ended up having Molinas on 23rd. That was his family, but he put it or set it up at Houston and 16th Street. At one time, it served as a civil defense post during World War II. Rex Cafe and Bakery, many of y'all are familiar with it. Established in 1947. Rogelio Guerrero was born in Camargo, Tamaulipas, and he came to live here in 1918. Reinera, still here, was founded in 1921, and it still exists today. The founder was A. Paras Torres. Woodmen of the World. This organization was an organization that was really a social type of service organization, and a lot of the Hispanic people and some of the Syrian-Lebanese people, because you see in there, the second one standing to from the left to the right was Ameri, okay? And he was in the organization, and so we had, thank you, we had them. They already told me already, I have 1 minute. So I'm going to Arturo Salazar, and I just want to tell you, he was somebody that was born here. He grew up on 17th Street. He received his doctoral degrees through Texas A&M University, his bachelor's and doctoral degrees, and he was an advocate for Latinos. Dallas ISD recognized it by naming a school after him in an elementary school. Okay. And then that's all for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We have Ms. Rosalie Weisfeld next. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Flores. And as he mentioned, we do have Rosalie Weisfeld as our next speaker. She will be tuning in, or she will be dialing in virtually. So. Give us 1 second. I believe they're queuing her up. By the way, Rex Cafe still has great biscuits. Hi,
Yes.
Rosalie. Yes, we can hear you. The floor is yours.
Yep, and a lot of politics happens over at Rex's as well. So I'm glad to be with you here virtually today. My name is Rosalie Weisfeld, as you heard, and my family has great roots going back, well, now over 100 years in the Valley. And as was stated, I'm Jewish. And this picture is a photograph, whoops, and there it goes, of me with my children in front of the, it's called the Aron HaKodesh. And above us, you can see the 10 Commandments. They're written in Hebrew. I'm standing with my 3 children, Samuel Seth, who's wearing a traditional prayer shawl that men wear, and he has his head covered with, some people call a yarmulke, some people a kippah, and my daughter Shayna, and my son, youngest son Jonathan, who still lives in the Valley, lives in McAllen, and is an attorney with the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley Medical School. I'm very proud of all 3 of my children. My son Samuel Seth is worked for many years with Pinterest and recently went out on his own to start his own company with 2 other partners. And my daughter is a fundraiser for good causes, and she lives in Austin. All 3 of them attended schools in McAllen, as did I and all 6 of my siblings, as well as many cousins. And we all graduated from McAllen High School, with the exception of Samuel Seth, who graduated from SciTech in Mercedes. But prior to that, he went through the McAllen school system. Next slide. I'll tell you more about the background of my family, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the other distinguished Jewish merchants, and there were many of them, one of which is Morris Edelstein. And as you can see, he immigrated from Lithuania, and Mr. Flores, Dr. Flores, has an amazing story about an infamous train derailment that happened in 1915, where Morris Atlas was involved, and he was saved because of his proficiency in Spanish. As with so many of the Jewish people who moved to the Valley, all of them adopted not only English as an additional language, and I can't even say a second language because most already spoke 3 or 4 languages, but English as well as Spanish. And he'll have to tell us more about that story at another time. And just a little bit about Morris Edelstein. His son, Ruben Edelstein, married my mother's cousin, Bernice, and they settled in Brownsville. And they had the Edelstein Furniture Company, of which there was several Edelstein stores in McAllen. And Ruben in Brownsville was elected mayor of the city. And you'll find that there are many Jewish people who also gave back to their community through public service and serving in public office. Next slide. Isidore Moritz is someone that I only know through history. He was placed in an orphanage while he was a toddler, and he came to the Valley in 1907. He worked with Brownsville Herald, and he established the newspaper, the Mercedes Enterprise, in 1908. And in 1916, he purchased the McAllen Monitor. Now, something interesting about Mercedes is that that is where one of the first temples in the South Texas was established. And the Mercedes Temple is now in the historical noted facility, and it is preserved by the Historic Commission of Texas. And because of its prominence as the center of Jewish life in the early 1900s. And later on, as more Jews came to the Valley, there was a temple that was established in Harlingen, in Brownsville, in McAllen, as well as in Laredo and in Corpus Christi. Next slide. Salmon B. Lack are well known throughout Texas. They have Lax Furniture Store. Something that I found out was that they started out with Lax Tire and Supply in downtown McAllen in 1935, and later opened their chain of very successful furniture stores. I knew Sam and B. Lack, and I was friends with their children, Sylvia Aronson. Son, Lee Aronson, is now the president of the Lax Furniture Company. And I knew all of the Lax as well as all of the Aronsons. They also helped to establish the new temple that I mentioned that was established in McAllen, because so many people had moved into the far McAllen area, Mission and Edinburgh, that they could afford their own place of worship. Now that temple was on Main Street, just south of Pecan. Next slide. Next slide. Can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Adolph and Mary Westerman. Mary was a Levine, and they came to the Valley in June of 1923, which is about the time that my grandfather also came to the Valley. They moved to McAllen in 1925 and established the Man Shop, which is located at 120 South Main Street. And the Westerman family ran that store for, well, on to 100 years. We're getting up there now. He also initially rented a house, but eventually built a couple of homes. And he bought a block on Nysa and an adjoining street and sold lots to members of the congregation. So that, and many of it were his neighbors, where, as I mentioned before, Sylvia and Morris Aronson, Rita and Morris Atlas. I just saw Morris Atlas's son Scott at sadly it was at a celebration of life for an old friend of ours who had passed away just this past Sunday. Alex Haberman, Florence and Lenny Croman were instrumental in the Valley in the vegetable business. And they had Ikunik. Ikunik was Florence's father. So her father started the business, and then Lenny came in, and then they had two children. Florence and Lenny had Lawrence and Susie Croman, which some of you in the audience I'm sure know, both graduated from Mech High. And just a couple of years ago, Susie and Lawrence sold their Croman, the Ikunik sheds to another enterprise. And in this photograph at the bottom is Mr. Schechterson. In the middle, I recognize him. I remember him as well. And he and so many of the other old timers, they spoke Yiddish. And they would get together in the evenings and they would play cards. The couples would play cards, canasta and bridge. And I fondly remember hearing them speak Yiddish, but that was the language that they spoke to each other. And unfortunately, I never learned. I learned Spanish as my dual language along with English, not Yiddish. I learned Hebrew as a child at Hebrew school. The next photograph. This is Mr. Albert Chaliff. I also remember the Chaliffs very well. And, it's amazing to me when I look at these dates and see that he was born in August 18th, 1888, because as a child, I remember them. They had also very successsul businesses, furniture company, as well as a toy store, which I love to go to. And that was located over on Broadway. And that would be his great-grandson, I guess, still lives in McAllen. Alan is a very successful plumber in McAllen. Next photograph. Now, this is the beginning of my family, from my paternal family, Morris and Pauline Weisfeld. Who is my grandfather, with their newborn son, their first child, my father, Samuel Weisfeld. But for some reason, everybody in the family called him Seymour. Now, when he went to the Army, they called him Sam. And some of the family affectionately called Seam. So he had multiple names, but actually just one, Samuel Weisfeld. His Hebrew name was Shmuel ben Moshe Yaakov, which is my father. That's the way Jewish people have a Hebrew name and an English name, and so his Shmuel was his Hebrew name. My grandfather's Hebrew name was Moshe Yaakov, and Ben means son of. So Shmuel ben Moshe Yaakov, and my grandmother's Hebrew name was Perla. So Perla, and Perla. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my grandfather, because while most of the Jews who came to down to South Texas worked in as downtown merchants, and you'll hear more about that too in a minute, because I had cousins that had a mercantile store. My grandfather went into a different kind of business, and that was into the citrus business. And he was very successful. And in fact, in 1995, he was inducted into the Citrus Mutual Hall of Fame. And my grandfather was born on April 15th, which is interesting, right? That's tax day for us over here, in 1900 in Sokolov, Poland, into a very large family. He was one of 9 children. He had an elder sister, my Aunt Tiana, who was married and moved to America with her husband, Joe Goldberg. Could you go to the next slide? I think that's Joe Goldberg. And, well, actually, this is more of the Weisfeld family. So before I get into that, my grandfather is standing in the middle, the older gentleman, next to my grandmother, Pauline. You saw them earlier. And my father is on the left behind my grandfather. He's the eldest, Samuel, who is married to my mother, Sarah Ellen, who's standing in front of my father. Then between my grandfather and my grandmother, behind them is my Uncle Harold. And my Uncle Harold stayed in the fruit business as well, but he moved out to California and established a very successful business out there, the fruit distributing company in Los Angeles. And all 3 of his children, my first cousins, who were all born in Los Angeles, all stayed in that business. Now, his eldest son, Jeff, took over the business and bought his father out. And then his second son, Stuart, started Worldwide Produce, which was a distribution company in not only in Los Angeles, but in all through the Central California area. And Lindy worked as a salesperson with them. So that's a little bit about my Uncle Harold. And then standing in front is my Uncle Sheldon. They called his first name actually was Irving. And they called him Little Irv. And when he was growing up, but when he went away to college, he started being known as Sheldon. And he's an attorney in criminal defense. And many of you probably know him. And then standing next to my grandmother is my Aunt Rosemary, who and her husband is standing behind her. And my Aunt Rosemary sadly was in a very bad car accident and became a paraplegic, but that didn't stop her. She went on to become a teacher for children in special education. And so from her wheelchair, she was an example to all of her students that disabilities, no matter how severe they could not limit a person. And she was a very successful teacher. Next. Next slide. Now, this is a picture of my Auntie Anna Weisfeld Goldberg. And standing behind her is Irving Goldberg, and then Duke, the salesman, is leaning up across the in the mercantile store. And they had this store in Pharr. And this is how my grandfather and all the rest of the Weisfelds, the Horowitzes, and the Garricks came to live in Pharr, Texas, because they came to the United States. They worked very hard. They had meager earnings, and they saved up their money, and they sent the money back and to the old country, and to help one of their siblings to come. And some of the children were older and married, and some were too young. And my grandfather was only 16 years old, and they decided that he would be the one that would go. And at the time, they called him Moshe. And when he left, unknown to Moshe, he would never see his parents, his siblings, or any of his other family members again. They were all either killed during the Russian pogroms or by Hitler, by the Nazis. And we lost that entire part of our family. Coincidentally, last night I went to see Fiddler on the Roof. So if any of y'all have seen Fiddler on the Roof, it's an amazing musical, and it takes place in 1905. And they talk about Kiev, and it's this mystical community called it's just Shtetl, a small community in Anatekva. And when I think about my family, when I think about my roots, that is the story. Fiddler on the Roof is the story of my family, because in there's a scene where the father is saying goodbye to one of his daughters, and he says, you know, I don't know when I'm going to see you again. And he said, only God knows. And that you know, I always get teary-eyed when I see that part, because that's what happened. He never was able to see his parents, his grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings again, except for one. When I remember when I was a child in the 1960s, there was a telephone that was on the wall at the time, and somebody called, and I went and answered the phone, and they asked for Moshe Weisfeld. And I was like, oh, well, you mean Morris Weisfeld? That's my grandfather, but I knew his Hebrew name was Moshe. And they said, yes. I said, well, he's not here, but I can get my mom. My mom's here. So I went and got my mom. I remember my mom in tears, and that one of the brothers had escaped to South America, and they talked. They were making plans to get together, and very sadly, my grandfather tragically died in a car accident, and they were never able to meet. But my father and my mother were able to meet him, and that's the story, really, of the Jewish people. And so when Moshe was only 16 years old, think about a 16-year-old, and he set off on foot for Vienna, Austria, and the trip was fraught with danger. He, at one point, had to hide in a haystack, and there were Polish soldiers camped all around, and he couldn't move. And you can imagine, he's in this hay, it's cold, his nose is probably itching, he's uncomfortable, and he can't move, because if he moves and he's discovered, he will be either captured and forced into the army or killed. And so he waited until the soldiers left, and he was able to continue on, and he worked in Vienna for 2 years until he got his resident card, and he was able to come to the United States. Now, when he came to the United States, they exchanged his money, had 17 cents, and he's in New York, and his sister's in Pharr, Texas. So it was several years that he worked and to make money. He met my grandmother in Chicago, and they had the 2 children, and he was able to make his way down to the valley as a peddler. And he came down, and he went into the peddled from the dry goods from the Goldberg store to all of the farmers and the ranchers, and then brought the fruits and the vegetables that he traded for back into the city. And then with refrigeration, the advent of refrigeration, he was prime in the area to start with the citrus career. And in 1930, he got a $500 loan, and that's how he got started. And my grandmother and grandfather would bring the fruit in from the trees, wash them in her washing tray, and in a big wash tub, and then they would pack it up, and he would take it up to San Antonio in his Ford Model T and to sell, and that's how they started. And he was one of the first ones to start packing to start planting ruby red grapefruit. I remember being a very young child, 4 or 5 years old, maybe 3 or younger, and they cut into a ruby red, and I saw how red it was. I could not believe that the grapefruit would be that amazing. But it's the story of poverty and of success and the American dream. And that's my family story, is the American dream. It can really happen. We started out, as I said, in a small temple in Mercedes, moved to the one on Main Street. Now we have the temple is on, excuse me, I'm sorry for the noise, on High Street. And high means life. And it's incredible that we have this life. Oh, you can go to the next slide. Sorry about that. I didn't tell you earlier. Because today happens to be the 27th of Nisan, which is Nisan is one of the months in the Jewish calendar. And today is Yom HaShoah. It's the Holocaust Memorial Day. And in Judaism, we say, as long as you say a person's name, as long as you tell their story, that person's going to live on. We also have a tradition of naming our children after those who have passed away. So the names are passed on. My name is Rosalie Weisfeld. My mother's name is Sarah Ellen. My grandmother's name, her mother, was Rosalie Lewis Sachs. Her Hebrew name was Rachaleah. So her name, my mother's Hebrew name was Sarah Chava Bat Rachaleah. My Hebrew name is Rachaleah Bat Sarah Chava, because I'm named after my grandmother. And then my daughter's name is Yafa Rachel Bat Rachaleah, which is my name. So you can see how the names move on. And it's so significant that today is Yom HaZikaron, which is the Day of Remembrance, La Shoah, of the Holocaust, Vela Gevura, which is of the heroism. Because we remember the Holocaust, and we also remember all those brave souls that fought so hard against the Nazis, against suppression. And in this picture, you can see there is Joe B. Goldberg and Anna Weisfeld Goldberg are standing right in the middle of the top photograph. And my grandfather is standing next to my grandmother, who is standing next to my father and my mother. And on the other side of my grandfather is my Auntie Anna, his sister, her husband, Joe Goldberg, and then my Uncle Sheldon and my Aunt Rosemary. Below them is my Uncle Joe and my Auntie Anna with their children. Now, this is very interesting because remember, they came here with pennies as well. My grandfather came with 17 cents. I don't know how much they had, but probably not that, maybe the same amount, maybe a little bit more. And they all worked very hard to become successful. Education is very important to the within the Jewish religion. Preserving our traditions and education. So the most important thing for them was to be sure that their children were educated. And
Rosalie,
yes,
if you can hear me, thank you so much for your story. We just went over on time a little bit there.
Oh,
but
I'm so sorry.
No,
Okay,
no,
can I
not
just
a
wrap
problem.
up and say goodbye? Let me
Yes,
just,
of course.
okay,
please.
end with this. So behind them are their children's. Helen Schaefer became a doctor. She was one of the first women to ever go to medical school at UT, and she became a pediatrician, and she married a doctor. And then their son, Billy Goldberg, became an attorney, and he became the chair of the Texas Democratic Party. And then their children are all very, are the same. And I didn't get to tell you my personal story, but I'm so glad I was able to share my family's. Thank you so much for having me today. And I look forward to hearing from my friends Nashla and Aziz, who we've been friends, what now, 40 years probably, maybe more.
Aziz said 50, but thank you so much.
50.
Can we get a round of
There you go.
applause for Rosalie?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much to Rosalie for sharing that fantastic story, not only of her family, but of other families in the Jewish community. It is now my pleasure to introduce Nashla and Aziz Showery. Here's the clicker.
Which one's the clicker? Which one? This one? Right. Okay. This- Over here. Okay. We have similar stories. What? We have similar stories. Our family came to the United States poor. They tried to find work wherever they could find, and they made it happen. I'm going to start with our family, and then I am going to proceed with the Khalifa family, and then I'm going to leave just one family member who is now in the glory of God's heaven, John Sahadi, to tell him your story, and I'm trying to wrap it up as interesting as possible. The first scene that I would like you to see is up here. No, what it says. The ancestors are moving mountains to see you rise. Is it up? Clip. Check. Okay, there you go. There you go. Thank you. Just settling down. And I saw this in a card, and I thought that this is exactly where we come from, our ancestors, and to respect our ancestors and how we're still in the same lineage of ancestry. And they want to see us rise because they suffered themselves too. Maybe some of them weren't able to leave the old land. All right, like in Arabic, you call it the blend. And then my summary of what we were going to do today is we were supposed to honor some of the Lebanese famous people, and I chose Dr. Debaki, and it's going to summarize everything that I feel that our parents raised us and how they raised us. And when I say these words, I would like you to say them to yourself. Real success requires respect for and faithfulness to the highest human values: honesty, integrity, self-discipline, dignity, compassion, humility, courage, personal responsibility, courtesy, and human service. The words of Dr. Michael Debaki, who was brought up in a shack and became the most popular, famous international heart surgeon and invented the artificial heart. Now let's talk a little bit about Lebanon. And I didn't know if some students would be here, so I wanted to see Lebanon. And so when in my days of teaching, if we were going to do an international business, I would tell the students, you've got to put a map up and the people have to see where the country that you're doing your report on. And if you see Lebanon, you see this. That red arrow right to the left. Oop, came back. I changed it. The red arrow right to the left. What a tiny little piece, Lebanon. And look what it's surrounded with. Turkey, Iraq, Egypt, Saudi, powerful nations. And so the time, let's just say the late 1800s. The late 1800s is what made most of our family come to the United States or go other places. And if you look here, of course, I want to say that this is Bat Helum. Bat Helum is the country, it's the city that the Caliphs came from, the Karams came from, or Karam, whichever pronunciation you feel comfortable with. And our father came from Zahle, which is across next to Syria. But I want to bring out the Cedars of Lebanon, and I also want to bring out what a tiny little piece of Lebanon that the Christians live in. Tiny piece compared to all the Muslims and the religious wars of the Druze. Well, who are the Druze? Were they Muslims? No, I don't know. Dr. Smiley is here, so he may be able to correct me. But what I read about is the Druze were warlike, but they believed in reincarnation. And the situation is there were religious wars. My mother was born in the Maronite, which is a Christian. My father was a Greek Orthodox. But what had happened, even the Greek Orthodox and the Christians had their own army fighting against these other groups. And this is what contributed to having them say, we have to go somewhere else. We have to go to America. When the boat comes, we don't know where it's going to land, but we have to go somewhere else. So in this situation, besides that, at one time, Lebanon was a thriving economic industry. And what was that? They had a relationship with France. And France had a relationship with the cocoons, with making silk. And with this situation is that all of a sudden there was a plague. And all the silk cocoons and the worms, they all died. So there was starvation there. There was lack of jobs there. And then here comes Turkey doing to Lebanon what Russia is doing to Ukraine. And that's only history. And so you can see the vision of how that was for them. Oop, next one. Now, I wanted to see that maybe a double slide, but I wanted you to see where our father came from, Zahle. In Zahle, there was a little itty bitty town called Showery, but Showery was close to Syria, and they labeled a lot of Lebanese Syrians. This is our very famous cedar tree, and we're very proud of the cedar tree. We don't idolize it, but it is to us strength. Oops, sorry. All right, so let's talk about our ancestry, the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were bred from Armenia, Greece, and Syria itself, and the Arab world itself. But the Phoenicians were not warriors. They were traders. They were business people. They always had what I know what Dorothea Brown always said in American history. You never bite off the hands that feed you, which means that they were traders. And if you're able to see the Phoenician ship hand-drawn, because there were no cameras there, look at their ingenuity, look at their engineering, and look at the fact that they went all the way to Africa and they went to the Middle East. They discovered the alphabet. They also discovered and created the color purple. How many emperors got that color purple? So they were business people. And then in 300 BC, which is 300 years before Jesus was born, the Romans came and conquered them because they were making money. The Romans were warriors. They destroyed all of their ports. And then Lebanon again went down with lots of suffering again. So the next slide. The next slide is a slide that came up when I was doing Ancestry.com. This starts with the family, with my mother's family. And I have to go through this with you to understand this. My grandmother and my grandmother and her mother visited Mexico City to be able to visit the brother or my great grandmother's son. And so what happened? They had a factory. Okay, French relationship. Maximiliano was there. And so my grandmother had just finished receiving her certification in fashion design. Oh, we need Emma to stay here. And then the great grandmother says, not unless she marries your partner. Oh, can you imagine? So she had to marry Slyman Karam. And together they started doing wonderful work in production. Well, that didn't last long because guess who came along? Pancho Villa. So where did the Karam brothers go, or the Karam brothers go? they went straight to where the money was, Parral, Chihuahua. And in Parral, Chihuahua, all of my aunties and my mother were born there. But in 1923, they had to get out. My grandfather was captured by Pancho Villa's men because, ¿dónde están las pistolas? Ya no hay. You know, el presidente de los Estados Unidos, ya cerró el puerto. And so they captured him and they were going to slam him down. But my grandmother, very smart, she goes to Pancho Villa's wife. They were friends because she made her wedding dress. And she says, what do I do? I have 5 girls. What do I do? She said, go to Pancho, go to Francisco, ask him for your husband's life. And she did. And so when the runner went to free my grandfather, they said, no, can't let him go. So guess what? Pancho Villa got upset, got in his Model T, and he slapped the general. Yo soy el general. Yo doy los órdenes. This is all the stories from my aunties. And so then he said, your wife and your children are on the way right now to the train station, and they're going to take a ferry, and they're going to go to the United States. And you're going to take these 2 horses, and you're going to go through the mountains of Chihuahua, and you're going to land in El Paso. And that's what happened until he made his way to the valley. And this is the truth with that. And they came to McAllen, and one of the brothers picked them up. The next slide. So there is my grandmother, Emma Gerardine. And Gerardine, they say, is the last name of Mona Lisa. And then next to her is my grandfather, Slyman Caron. And then next to that, those people, my mother and father, who were married, I believe, 1927. And I know the reason that happened is because my grandfather fell very ill. And they sent a Morse code to El Paso to the Lebanese community. We need a husband. We need a husband for our oldest daughter to take care of the family. And our father had just been released from the United States Army. He was ready to go. He became a great husband. He became a great brother-in-law to my aunts. And if you saw the last slide, Aunt Maggie, Aunt Margaret Sahadi, and I heard somebody here that she was a godparent to you, and so is Uncle Joe, but she was just 5 years old. Just imagine the fear of writing, not even knowing if you'd be alive if you were 5 years old. So we're going on to the next scene because I wish you could see this in big picture form. If you want to see this in big picture form, go to J. Karam, and then you're going to do first generation, or look up Raymond Karam, and you will see these pictures. The first picture is a picture of the Lebanese group of men that got together to help others to come to the United States. They funded them. And miraculously, on the second picture, this is where they had their stores on 17th Street, and they lived behind 17th Street. So this is a sample of the homes that they lived in. And I'm sorry, it's difficult to see, but their businesses were in front of their homes. Why? So they could go eat, and the wife would prepare the food. And we'll get to that with the Khalifas. It was the same situation. And I'd like to tell you how proud I am, because this man at the very top of the left and the man at the very top of the right is my father, our father, and the left is my son-in-law's grandfather. So isn't that wonderful? But because when we talk about God, we talk about him being active, because I have 2 granddaughters, and they're half Mary, half Karam, and Showery. My son-in-law says, "Oh no." and here is the boarding house that these people had put together. My parents put it together in 1926. You will see in the past one, the past film, the past photo, this very corner over here, my mother was sitting in a bench where 17th Street was a dirt road, and then look at these 3 Lebanese girls. Aren't they beautiful? And behind them, they had a rock fence, and that's what they did. They had rock fences behind their houses. And so they did their work. They were devoted to each other, And I would like to say that in the 1940s, early 40s, most of these Lebanese men, if you knew that they were wearing suits in this hot summer sun, Lebanese men were peddlers. And they were peddlers with either walking the merchandise or having a horse. And guess who lent them money? The Jewish community lent them money. And they were honest and they paid everything back. Now, the Lebanese families on 17th Street were one community. So the Khalifas, the Karams, and the Showerys all worked together. The men worked together. They were all related. They helped each other. They understood each other. They'd go take a walk and visit, especially Aunt Bahije. All right, we're going to the next scene, which is a real true scene. The man in the middle is Raymond Karam. And this man was one of the head peddlers and making a lot of money. But I want you to see the sacrifices that these people lived in, a rock house. And the person, this young man here that has a Pancho Villa bullet on his chest, and Theo Ramon were killed by bandits, as it says on the very top, peddling goods because the bandits came looking for guns. And it was like a hysteria. They couldn't accept that the war was over. Now, in late 1939 and 1940, Monsignor tried. He was appointed Monsignor by the Patriarch, and I mentioned to you that we belong to the Maronites, which is an Eastern rite. We're not underneath the Roman rite. We're separate. Well, he's appointed. He was appointed as a Monsignor, and he said, "You better do your job. You got to make it church and make it church in San Antonio." And you see all these men here, and you see that some of these men were very devoted to the McAllen community, but they gave that up. And I showed you Khalil Mary, who is my son-in-law's grandfather. At that time, he was making a lot of money. He had 8 children. He had a candy store. He made candy. His children wrapped the candy, and he would peddle them to drugstores. He was already becoming a candy distributor. But no, they decided to go to San Antonio, and that's where they stayed. And the family is very active there at St. George's Maronite Catholic Church. Now, the person below us is E. Karam Dry Goods, Elias Karam. Elias Karam was catacorner to the Khalifas, and he was the only child that was allowed to have a wife. Everybody else just stayed single and worked the family business. So Monsignor Trad goes to Lebanon and takes Uncle Elias and said, "We're going to find you a wife." Oh, right. So he found Aunt Margaret, and a lot of people remember Aunt Margaret, a beautiful woman who cooked and sold pastries, and she was diligent and honest and all those traits like I reread before. And so Raymond now is a retired attorney, and he sent that incredible video that I got all those pictures from. Now, the next one is something that I'm not going to say very much about. Aziz is my brother. And the next one is how it really was on 17th Street. On 17th Street, I remember trucks being pulled up and the Ballesteros would come out. I didn't realize that the reason the Ballesteros program was produced and developed was because a lot of men were in World War II. And then people in Mexico were trying to get jobs, and they had to convince their wives, let him come. He'll get something good in the bracero world. So that's what we went through. The last one that I'm going to cover is John Sahadi. John Sahadi was raised by my mother and father on 17th Street. He learned the nickel and dime and penny. He left Mexico City to come and start an international store. And his sons continue. May he rest in peace. But his sons continue. If you see Sahadi chicken up the kitchen up there, that is his granddaughter following up with his recipes. The last one I'm going to show you is that we are still in business. And I can tell you, Showery Stereo, after Cartridge City, selling records and cassette tapes, and I didn't even tell you how God works, is that this franchise belonged to my son-in-law's father. But that's the businesses we have. And now we're going to go to the Khalifa brothers. I have to cover the Khalifas. The Khalifa brothers, Leah's Khalifa came through as his own. And his wife was killed by the Turks. So he came on his own and he built his store, his original store, like all of us did. And he left his son and daughter, and it took him 10 years to come from France to come to the United States, and they worked together. And I have to tell you, you see Bahija there and her brother. She cooked for everyone so everybody could work. And here we are with a special scene of fabrics, and this is Tio Jose and his beautiful wife. And they worked together, and they had Khalifa dry goods stores, and all their children worked in the business. And you'll see all their children in just a little while. And here are all their children. And if you look at how they grew up knowing this is what I like to do. There was a grocery store, a feed store, a seed store, a shoe store, a baby shop, a boutique. And today there is still Khalifa's Western Wear, Khalifa's Paint Store, and other enterprises. Abdallah has been a very investment-oriented businessman and is very well respected. He is on the board of directors of Lone Star National Bank. And I can just say, growing up the way we grew up, we became very strong business people. Amen.
That was a good job. Did a good job. All I could do is good as you.
Oh, stop it. Throw ice with the Densorgetta off of the, they climb up through a window, and then where the cantinas were, the guys are so excited because they were dancing to the quintanera with they were dancing to the music, and they were all excited. But Fidencio and my brother Sliman, and I forgot to introduce my brother Sliman here. My brother Sliman, can you stand up and say hello to everybody? He was the baby of the family. And they throw ice, and they thought God was punishing them.
Thank you so much, Nashla. Can I get a round of applause, please? Please? Yes, thank you. Thank you. We hate to cut you off, but just because of the respective time, for now, we're going to take a brief intermission, 5 minutes to get up and stretch, and then we'll be right back to finish the presentation. Thank you all so much.
It's supposed to be over at 8:30. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, if we can turn over our seats. Looking around. Microphone check. All right, thank you, everybody. If we can return to our seats, we're going to continue with our program. Mr. Aziz Showery will be next with a very brief presentation, and then we'll be going to Gerry Garcia with the Chamber of Commerce.
All right, thank you. Hello. I wanted it's a hard act to follow my sister. I want you to know. It's really a hard act, but I will try to gesticulate less and not be as articulate as her, but I will try to tell you the story about why my family were successful peddlers. And the reason for that was they were hungry and they needed to eat and they needed to make money. So in 1930, the population was about 9,000. I ran across some articles in the McAllen Daily Press before the Monitor was in business. And in some of those articles that I read about my parents, because I didn't know anything about my parents before I was born. Nobody would have known about their parents before they were born anyway. But, all right, let me just tell you what she said. Yes, my parents were born, and in 25 years, they were childless, and the power of prayer, I believe, moved my mother's womb and moved my father's, you know what, and I was born in 1948. But let me tell you the story. Let me tell you the story about how they became peddlers. All right. So in this McAllen Daily Press, they said in 1926, peddlers were able to make a living. And a peddler would be someone who loaded up their merchandise in their vehicle. And I'm sure in 1920s, they were riding, what were they driving? Model Ts. Yes, right, exactly. They were driving Model Ts. And in order to buy, or in order to sell, they had to buy their products. And thank God there was a Jewish merchant in Mission by the name of Sam Greenfield. And he was our parents' supply chain. You know, the supply chain never ran out in Mission because most of the Jews who did live in Mission were supplying the other Jews who were living in, who had businesses on Main Street. But he told my grandmother, and my mother, that you all have honest faces, so I can trust you. So they sold it to them on credit. And back in those days, if you sold somebody on credit, you know, it was like you had to give them your right arm if you didn't pay them back. But they did. Paying back what they bought and selling and making enough money so they could buy property. Now, sitting down here is a descendant of the Vela family. And Carolina, thank you for coming. She told us the story about her great-great-grandfather, I believe, who sold the building that is currently on Chicago and 17th Street. And that building still exists today. So they bought that building for $1,500 in 1926. And then in 1930, they bought another building for $2,000. So they saw the opportunity to start buying property on 17th Street. Now, I didn't know much about my father, what he did before, and the only thing I knew about my father is that he was a tinkerer. He liked to work on electronics, and he was always very popular. He was also very well liked. And I also found out that he was a philanthropist. He was a philanthropist, and by that is that he gave money away and he helped people who needed help. I did not know that about my father. He was in the Lions Club, and he gave away a lot of his money and a lot of property to people who couldn't afford to buy their own house. And he always told me that we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. That kind of stuck to me for a long time because I was young when I heard that from my father, and I didn't know what it meant. But when my father told me that, it sort of showed me his character, showed me his humanitarianism and his heart. And if people know me, they know that I have the same kind of heart my father has. So my father also was a contributor to different projects in McAllen. I guess before the government gave away money, the community had to pool their money together, and if they wanted to invest in property, that's how they did it. So my father organized 152 businessmen to raise money to build a 11-story hotel. The cost of the construction was $300,000, and they were able to raise $75,000. Now, this is what I read in the McAllen Daily Press, but I didn't read anything else about if the hotel was ever completed, because I never saw an 11-story hotel in McAllen, so I don't know what they did with the money. So I don't know if anybody would know whatever happened to the money that they saved to build that hotel. So that's an interesting story about McAllen. And then another article in the McAllen Daily Press was, my sister showed the picture, was the American Lebanon Syrian Society. It was also a philanthropic organization. And what it did is that they would help people who needed charity and those who needed shelter or they needed food. And my father was one of those contributors, and he also helped those people. Now, I didn't know much about my mother other than the fact that she was my father's wife, and she was my mother. But I knew she had a life. I knew she had done something with herself. And I found out that she was a singer. She was an entertainer. And she would be hired, or she would be asked to sing at different social events. In fact, I found an article that she sang at the junior senior prom. She sang La Estrellita. I don't know if y'all are Mexican enough to know these songs. And she would be always called to sing La Estrellita. And she always would sing the Indian Love Call. Now, I Googled those two songs. I Googled those songs on YouTube, and I had never heard those songs, but when I heard them, it brought me to tears because my mother sang those songs, and she sang them so well that people would hire her. And she had also recorded an album that got lost in, well, I don't know where it is now, but I was proud of the fact that my mother recorded an album. And but my mother and father, they showed us a lot of things about life. But let's fast forward to 1948. So I was born in 1948, 25 years after my parents were married. And then my sister was born in 50, and my brother, Sloman, who's sitting in the audience, I don't know where he is, but he was here, and he was born in 1951. Now, while all of this was going on, the peddling and the selling and the clothes and all that, 1946, America went to war. And a lot of the laborers, how many minutes do I have left? 1 minute? Oh, no, you ain't going to give me 1 minute. I'm not done. You got to just be patient with me. So in 1946, the Bachelor program was started. And the Bachelor program was to bring workers into the United States to work where others were not willing to work. So they brought in Mexican and Native workers. And where did they go? They all went to 17th Street. So when they came to shop in McAllen, 17th Street was sort of like, okay, they'll shop here, but they rather go to Main Street because that's where all the modern stores were. But 17th Street catered to the Hispanics, the Mexican Americans. And 17th Street was called Mexican Town. And because it was Mexican Town, the Ballesteros would go to 17th Street, and 17th Street is where they enjoyed to shop. And so our parents catered to the needs of these Ballesteros, and that's why we showed the picture of the Ballesteros up there. And so when men who work 6 days a week and they get paid, what do you think they want to do with their money? They want to go spend it. So these men would come to McAllen 17th Street, and my parents, who are very businesslike, had a clothing store, and it was called A Showery Dry Goods. A Showery Dry Goods was on the corner of Chicago and 17th. It's still there. The building is still there. And my mother would be selling clothes. And as a youngster, I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I would go to 17th Street and help my parents sell clothes. Well, in the back of the store, my father had a radio shop, and he would fix radios. And then he started tinkering with a new invention called the television. And that's how my father was well known as an electronics wizard. And I think that's why we got into the stereo business, because my father taught us how to build radios. I remember building a radio in a shoebox, and the shoebox, we put it together, all the parts, and we made it work. And I was really proud that I could do that at about 10 years old. So while my mother was selling clothes, my father was back there tinkering with his TVs, and the Ballesteros would come in, and they wanted to eat. So they would go to El Buen Gusto. El Buen Gusto was a restaurant right next to the store. And then if they wanted to let loose the Ballesteros, they would go and enjoy a Falstaff, Lone Star, or a Pearl beer, and they would find themselves at a lounge or a cantina. But those who needed a shower to rest their tired bodies would end up at the Rio Hotel. And these were all businesses owned by A Showery. They were all owned by my parents. That was the first time that I realized that business makes you money. And if you do business right, you can make a lot of money. So I believe that that was one of the legacies that my parents left me, that Lebanese Syrians were able to identify with the Mexicans, the ethnic Mexicans in the area. And their ability to rise was due to many different variables, and including personal ingenuity. But one reason that they always fared well was that they started businesses rather than working for someone. So that's real important. They came over here as immigrants, migrants, whatever names you want to say they are. And with the little money they had and their ingenuity and their success to make money was passed on to me and to my sister and to my brother. And I'm so thankful that the city of McAllen, because my father was able to mix with the Anglo community. The Anglo community accepted my father because his name was Aziz Showery, but he became known as Albert Showery to the Anglos, and to the Mexicans, he was Alberto Showery. So my father had all kinds of different not personalities, but he had different, what do you call it? Say it? Yeah, connections, there you go. So with the Anglos and with the Hispanics, because what were we? We were not Hispanics, we were not Anglos, but according to some Supreme Court ruling in Dallas that they considered Arab Americans to be white. I don't know. I consider myself to be olive, so I don't know what that means. So this is why I'm so proud to be here, why I'm so proud to be up here telling you about my family, because other relatives in my family also, like my Aunt Margaret Sahadi, she married Joe Sahadi, and they also had a business. They had a business called MacArthur Cleaners in the 40s, and in the 50s they opened up Ace Foods, which was later sold to M. Rivas. So from there, Mr. Sahadi Sr. taught that trade to my cousin John, and he opened up Sahadi Foods. So the other relatives in my family, the other aunts, they married other Lebanese men, and they opened up businesses themselves. So you can see that part of our culture was passed on to their to my mother's siblings, but it also was passed on to my generation. And I'm passing this on to my son. I have two sons, and both of them are involved in the insurance business. The American dream that was realized by our grandparents and parents, their contribution to McAllen and the Rio Grande Valley attests to their determination to succeed and improve not only their lives, but also for McAllen to gain from their successes. Because without their successes, McAllen would not have had the experience of knowing a culture that was diverse and different. That's why I believe that the Lebanese, the Jewish culture are so similar. And I wanted to tell Rosalie that my parents bought their products from Mr. Greenfield, and also Albert Chaliff had a furniture store at the other end of the corner of 17th Street. And I learned about culture, and I learned how to understand other people. And I think it's important that if you're going to be successful in anything in life, that you must accept people that are different than you. You should not criticize those who come over to this country who want to make a living for themselves. We should be open to them, because had they not been open to my grandparents and my father coming to this country, I wouldn't be standing here. Thank you very much.
Very, very well said. Before Aziz came up here, I heard him say this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity to share this story. So once again, a round of applause. And I'm pleased to introduce Gerry Garcia with the McAllen Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gerry Garcia with the McAllen Chamber, and I've been with the Chamber for 23 years. I started working there in 1999. Born and raised in McAllen, went to Mac High, have lived all my life in McAllen. My father came with his parents in the 1950s. He was 7 years old. So I'm first generation American on my father's side and third generation American on my mother's side. So it's been a wonderful time working for the Chamber of Commerce, and I want to share some things with you. Who knows what the Chamber of Commerce is? Does everybody here know what a Chamber of Commerce is and what it does? Because when I started working at the Chamber, I didn't know. I thought that the Chamber of Commerce was an organization that cut the ribbons at a grand opening, and that's it. And boy, have I learned that that's not it. Let me tell you a little bit about the purpose of the Chamber. The purpose of the McAllen Chamber of Commerce is to represent the McAllen business community at all levels, to drive economic growth, innovation, and business development, and to be a catalyst to grow the economy through marketing, making connections, and increasing tourism and visitors in McAllen. The Chamber has a CVB, or Visit McAllen. It promotes McAllen and increases tourism by welcoming visitors to McAllen. Invited to McAllen so they can stay in our hotels, eat at our restaurants, shop in McAllen, and attend events throughout the city. The first time the term Chamber of Commerce was ever documented was in France in the 1500s, where it then expanded to Germany, then eventually throughout Europe. It spread first to America in 1768, when the New York State Chamber was formed, and at this time, modern chambers became more of an American development. The first local Chamber of Commerce was founded in 1773 in Charleston, South Carolina, and today there are over 4,000 chambers of commerce in the United States. In 1910, before the city was incorporated in 1911, the Businessmen's Club, which was the predecessor of the McAllen Chamber of Commerce, was in existence and making some changes to a very young McAllen. The McAllen Chamber of Commerce was incorporated in 1925. It was evident that allowing newcomers and different ideas to settle in McAllen was important for the McAllen Businessmen's Club. It contributed $2,500 to secure land for a military camp in 1916 for National Guardsmen from New York. The thousands of troops sustained along the Rio Grande were a powerful deterrent to lawless elements. Because of the military, businesses opened in shifts to keep up with customers. Businesses also had tents along Main Street and opened cafes, bars, dime stores, and a hotel that welcomed Yankees and their money. In 1965, at a McAllen Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meeting, the city began the process of creating the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone with the help of community leaders to start the city's growth in a new direction. And I wanted to take a moment to share some photos with you that when the Chamber of Commerce was at 10 North Broadway, when I began working at the Chamber, it built a new chamber 3 years later. And my boss at the time, Steve Alanius, asked me to choose some photos that were in storage because we wanted to hang them in the new building. So I did. So I took those photos down from a wall that is right across my office, and I get to see them every single day. And I chose them to hang them on the wall because of everything that they represent. It really impressed me. This first photo was in 1910, the first 4th of July parade. This became an annual event started by the American Legion. The store on the extreme left is a Texas Confectionery, an ice cream and soda pop shop. And next to it is McAllen's first general store, McCloskey's. On the right side of the street, next to the commercial hotel, are two new buildings, one a restaurant and the other a furniture store. 1916, New York National Guard arrives. After well-organized plans for a Mexican uprising against the United States were found in the possession of a Mexican revolutionary arrested in McAllen, a regiment of the New York National Guard was sent in to patrol the area. 1916, inside the first post office. The U.S. mail connected both the soldiers and McAllen residents and the rest of the United States. On the right, closest to the fireplace, is Postmaster Charles January. This next photo is of a groundbreaking of the Casa de Palmas Hotel in 1917. The hotel was opened in 1918 and is now a McAllen landmark located on Main Street and Business 83. This one is one of my favorites. It's schoolgirls at McAllen in 1917. 1923 Sunday School Parade on April 22nd, 1923, a time to save souls and show off finery. This Sunday School Parade coincided with Easter Sunday. And I wanted to show you, in 1928, McAllen's new 85-bed hospital, the second built in McAllen. This city hospital boasted 3 operating rooms and electric elevators. Wards went for $2 to $4 a day. Both included access to a floor nurse, but a private nurse would cost $12.50 a day and $1.50 for their board. The operating room fee ranged from $4 to $15, with an additional $3 laboratory fee for all surgery patients. Kreidler Ambulance transported the sick for $1 per mile with a minimum $5 service. All hospital and ambulance fees had to be paid in advance. And you can see that on the door. It says Kreidler. So that was truly amazing to me because I know you all are familiar with Kreidler Funeral Home. Then over here on the right, circa 1930, modern McAllen is outfitting the great courts at the corner of 2nd and Ash with a refrigerator per unit was Wayland's Refrigeration's biggest sale at that time. The refrigerator sold for about $200 each. This is an amusement club at the corner of Main and Chicago. Cards, dominoes, shuffleboard, and refreshments made this a popular hangout. The downtown JCPenney store used to occupy this corner. Sacred Heart Church in the rear was constructed in 1938 to replace their wooden building that had burned. These are the chamber buildings. In 1950, that building was then transformed to the 1970s, and you can see they just added the front of the building to help with, it was the reception area. So when I started working at the chamber, I began in that building in the 1970s, that was built during the 1970s on Broadway and Ash Street. Then my boss at the time was, we're going to build a new chamber building. And I was like, okay, whatever. And by the time I knew it, we were in this new building at 1200 Ash Avenue, which is just right across the street from where the old building used to be. So what does the chamber do now? After many functions throughout history, the chamber has changed and adapted as needs have changed in our community. But its primary function of protecting and enhancing commerce remains the McAllen Chamber's top priority. The Chamber's Business Development Department remains one of the most innovative and aggressive in developing programs for new businesses and entrepreneurs. It currently has 17 programs to assist in making people's hopes and dreams of opening their own businesses or inventing and selling their own products come true. The Chamber has 6 departments. We have membership, community relations and international business, a convention and visitors bureau, a finance department, business development and startups, and special projects and government affairs, all working as a team to enhance the city, promote McAllen, protect commerce, drive economic growth, innovation, and business development. Currently, Texas has 510 chambers of commerce, and in 2014, the McAllen Chamber was designated as a 5-star accredited chamber by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Countless hours were spent completing the accreditation process, and we excelled in 9 core areas ranging from finance, program development, and government affairs to technology and facilities. The result of its hard work is evidenced by this impressive rating. This was truly a milestone achievement, as only 7 other chambers of commerce in Texas were accredited, and the McAllen Chamber remains the only accredited chamber of commerce in the Rio Grande Valley. I brought copies of a book that we print at the chamber. It tells you a little bit about what the chamber does. And so you're not going to believe how many programs the chamber has and does. And so at the end of the program, I will make sure everybody gets a copy and that we print it there at the chamber. And also, I wanted to share with you, I know that Dr. Flores brought this up, is a book that the chamber had published in 2011. And so it talks about the chamber, the city of McAllen's first 100 years. So I have these, if in case anybody wanted to purchase one, you can purchase one for $30. And we're having them on sale from $49.95 to $30. So if anybody's interested, I have them with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerry Garcia. I got to see some photos that I've honestly never seen before, so that was fantastic. It's now my pleasure to introduce our last panelist, Mr. Mark Garcia.
Good evening, everybody. A lot of information, a lot of history here tonight. I think you all, it's going to be hard to compete with you all. The history of our corporations, both the Foreign Trade Zone and the EDC don't go that far back. But yeah, I'm Mark Garcia, Executive Vice President of the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone. Been there for 20 years, so Gerry has a few years up on me. But yeah, I just as a sidebar, I am from Brownsville originally. I'm native from Brownsville. Came up here in the early 90s. Live up there in North Edinburgh, and I know there is some ranches up there, and I don't know if the Velas and the Guerras are all related, but way up there in North Edinburgh, of course, San Manuel and stuff, there's Chapa. Well, we got D.V. Guerra and his ranches, and the Velas have 490 on ranches, so I'm not sure how everybody's related, but that's when I started hearing those last names, and they sounded familiar. Okay, well, great. So when Dr. Flores asked if I wanted to present some history on both organizations, I thought about it and said, you know what? First, he had asked, well, can you do MEDC? And I really couldn't do MEDC without talking a little bit about the Foreign Trade Zone, because MEDC actually came out in the early 2000s from the foreign trade zone. So let me get started here. So is anybody familiar with the foreign trade zones and how they work and at all? It's kind of I didn't expect to hear a lot of yeses, but it's one of those niche programs that was established back in 1934 to really promote and help our local industries compete with other countries that had trade agreements with the U.S. and assist them with make them more competitive in exports. So basically, a foreign trade zone is a business. It's found in the United States. It's a physical secured area within the U.S. located in or close to a port. And an FTZ is considered basically outside customs territory. So there's a lot of things that can be done in a foreign trade zone inside the boundaries that can't be otherwise. So there's a lot of benefits there for companies that really know how to use them. But again, it's one of those kind of niche programs that a lot of people don't know about, but very interesting, a lot of history there. So basically, foreign trade zones would generate about $630 billion in activity. Those are the figures back from 2020. Over 470,000 people employed in foreign trade zones, 298 foreign trade zones throughout the U.S. 675 subzones at this time. We actually have 7 here locally called usage-driven sites, and a lot of you might be familiar with names like Black & Decker, TS Tech, Symbol Technologies. Those are all companies that are actually operating in a foreign trade zone, and they found that some of those advantages really help them save money and create more revenue for them. So it's really interesting in the way they take advantage of it. So the foreign trade zone, a couple of milestones. The McAllen Foreign Trade Zone started to try to get created back in 1965, and basically 20 investors sat around the table, and these are a mixture of people from the chamber, industrial boards, a lot of the business leaders, and nobody really knows who brought up the subject or the term foreign trade zone, but it came up in one of the meetings, and they decided to go ahead and try to create something. So everybody pitched in $5 to try to form a foreign trade zone, and it was headed up by John Freeland, which was the current president, and then Morgan Talbot, FTZ board president, Peter Pate, who was the current chamber president at the time. So they formed it, they submitted an application, and it took them 5 years to get a response from the Secretary of Commerce. It was quite a struggle, and really, if you thought about it, back then there wasn't a lot of people utilizing trade zones or really knew what they were. So they finally got their first crack at it to get approved in 1970, which was, I guess, one of the people in the group or in the team, along with John Freeland, Mayor Jack Wetzel, was part of the testimony before the board. John Freeland, which is what the VP of the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone when it was formed, conducted the case, submitted letters of support from Kika de la Garza, Representative Senator John Tower, and State Representative Raul Longoria. So there was a lot of heavy hitters on the team there, and they were really working hard to get that approved. This is just some of the pictures from the testimony given in Washington, D.C. at the time. Now it's a lot easier to get approval for a foreign trade zone, but it was a real uphill battle for them at the time. There's a picture on your right, probably I'm not sure if you're right or left, but John Freeland, which was a real estate attorney. And then, of course, he's providing testimony along with other supporters from the Secretary of the Foreign Trade Zone Program, the board in Washington, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and people from CBP and so forth. So it was from what I understand, it was a real gut-wrenching type testimony, but they gave it a whirl, and it seemed to have worked out, because in 1970 their application was approved, and while here, I'll show some pictures of why it was such an uphill battle. But the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone was actually the first one, the first inland foreign trade zone ever created, because the early foreign trade zones were located usually on an ocean port, Hawaii, San Francisco, New York. Those were some of the first trade zones ever established. And that was one of the other reasons that they had such a hard time, was it was the first one on an inland port. So a lot of people really didn't understand how it was going to work and whether it should be approved. So the service area, when we started out, went from 40 acres to 80 acres, and then it grew from there. And then of course we grew to cover all of Hidalgo County through changes through our boundary modifications. The McAllen Foreign Trade Zone owns and manages almost a million square feet of warehouse and distribution space. At the beginning, just to get it started, there was $150,000 bonds that were issued to get the first building constructed on those initial 40 acres. I'm sorry, the 20 acres. And it was all paid back, I believe, in 1995, around that time. So they did good in being able to repay their debt. So here's a picture of the way the trade zone looked back in '72, and if you look up there on the top corner of that image, working, but well, anyway, up there on the top corner, you can see the very first building. In fact, that's our office now. It's been renovated, of course, over a few times, but you can see where it was kind of one of those field of dreams at the time, because it was all farmland, and a lot of people were scratching their heads and said, why do y'all want to create a trade zone out in the middle of nowhere where we're not even located on a major port? So again, that was one of the challenges they had, but it ended up working, and now, if you look at the trade zone today, that whole area has grown. Joy Dean, back in the day, she was our executive vice president, retired, but she's one of the first employees, and she remembers coming to work when it was just all fields, a little two-way road, caliche, and it has grown into what it is now. So we own and manage everything within that yellow boundary. And most of those buildings located in the foreign trade zone, we'll be able to build and construct over time. So the other part of this was the MEDC. When Othel Brand and the industrial board got together, and they wanted to see how we can actually promote a lot more of the industry or industrial projects and try to create, because back then we had the Maquiladora program that I just started out. It was actually started earlier than that, but it really never took off until NAFTA really was created. So in 1988, McAllen Industrial Board and the McAllen Foreign Trade Zone merged and became the McAllen Economic Development Corporation. Mike Allen was hired by then Mayor Othel Brand to head up the McAllen Economic Development Corporation and the Foreign Trade Zone. Keith Patridge was hired just right after Mike came on board, and then the mayor basically gave Mike and Keith their marching orders, and that was three important tasks, which were to get better relations with Mexico, put the foreign trade zone in the black, and create and maintain jobs. So in 2005, there was a split, and they both became different corporations, but we still had Mike at the time that was president of both. So what do we do? What is McAllen Economic Development? It's basically a nonprofit corporation which works with both the city of McAllen and Reynosa to attract new industrial investment and employment opportunities to our region. We are the single point of contact for the new and existing companies interested in growing in the U.S. and the Mexico region. MEDC provides information to prospects relating to looking at doing business on both sides of the border, and the financial incentives and opportunities that come with that. We also work with our local educational institutions to develop customized training programs for existing and future businesses, in a nutshell. So this was Mike Allen. A lot of there's a lot of history behind Mike. I don't know if anybody here knew McAllen, but he was a pretty extraordinary man. He started back in 1988, of course, with as president of the Foreign Trade Zone and MEDC. But before that, he was actually a priest, and he was a priest there at the Sacred Heart down in downtown McAllen. So a lot of interesting things with Mike. Of course, he was also former District 3 South Texas College Board trustee and 2006 Border Texan of the Year. A lot of accolades went along with that. He got a lot of awards, TexDOT Road Hand Awards. I can spend a lot of time on what he achieved. Unfortunately, Mike passed back in 2010, but there were a lot of people that remembered Mike. In fact, in Reynosa, they named a street after him, a boulevard that was part of the original Maquiladora Park, which is Parque Reynosa. That was the first one ever established, and both him and Keith worked really hard in creating and bringing industry into Reynosa. So they named that that boulevard leading into that park after Mike. And I don't know if y'all noticed also, but FM 1016 down there on Military around STZ, their tech campus going all the way to Sherry Road is actually McAllen Boulevard as well. Yeah, he was a priest, and of course down at Sacred Heart. And it's funny because his wife Teresa, he actually married her and her husband the first time around. And Mike actually married Teresa after he left the priesthood after that. So it was kind of interesting on how that worked out for Mike. But, they lasted together for quite some time. They were really happy together. So it's a pretty neat story. McAllen actually hired me too. And it was funny the way that worked out. When I went for my second interview, I'd already been hired, well, not hired, but interviewed by Joyce Dean, which was the executive VP at the time. And she goes, well, you're going to have to get with the big boss, and before we can say yes or no, so you're going to have to come back and we'll schedule a meeting. So they finally scheduled. I went back. I was in my suit, sitting there in the lobby waiting to see Mike, and he comes out. And I had heard a lot of things about Mike. I knew he was a very, a demanding person. And so he said, you know what, hey, you didn't have to put a suit on for me. I was sitting there all dressed up. Let's jump in the truck. I need to go down and do something real quick. So we head to his house, and we're heading over there, and he gets down and he says, I'll be right back. And he gets down, talks to his landscaper there for a while, brought him some lemonade and there's something to drink. I don't know if it was tea or lemonade, but he was there for a little while, came back to the truck and said, okay, let's head back to the office now. So we're walking up, and I said, well, I thought we were going to continue our interview then. And he was like, oh, so Mike, are we ready to go? Are we going to go to your office? He goes, oh, no. I just needed somebody to go with me to my house and pay the landscaper, but you're good, you're hired, you can start on Monday. So that was one of the easiest interviews I had ever been through. But it was a real neat story. But that's just the type of person he was. And I know I've already seen the 5-minute mark, but that's Mike. I ran through that picture. After that, he got himself, he didn't get a Harley, but he got himself a little scooter after that to buzz around the industrial park. I guess that's where he got his passion for that. This is Keith. Keith, of course, worked really hard, the dynamic duo. Keith and Mike did a lot of stuff together. Keith is a real strategist. Mike, of course, a former lobbyist as well. A lot of political connections. Keith with his big ideas and his great forethought into the future and what can grow McAllen. So they both did really good together in their achievements. Keith is of course, he's still our CEO right now. So he's both of them, like I said, work real good together. Darrell Wilson was our first chairman of the board. D. Wilson Construction. They've been around for some time. Bill has been a big part of our board as well, very active in helping us get to where we're at today. Of course, that was the Maquila program, which they were really pushing back at the time, which allows American companies to actually, or foreign companies to manufacture in Mexico and take advantage of various tariff rates and bring stuff back. And, we can spend another probably an hour and a half just on that alone. But basically, they took the Maquila program and started really promoting it in Asia. There was Keith when they went on their first trip to China. John's son, I don't know if y'all House of China, Mr. Cholesterol Free Oil, he was there on that trip, a real ambassador. And then one of the consultants we had back then that was helping us with Asia. This was another trip here. This was actually to Kia in Korea. Commissioner Jan Klink, Tito Torres, Mike Blum, John Son again there, Keith, and of course our male Alto brand. Mike is back there in the very back. They really tried hard to recruit those companies from Asia, and it really worked. Of course, there was one of our board meetings back in '96. That was, of course, on GW. Governor at the time, I think he'd just been elected in '95, I believe, and of course, Otto Brand. And the reason this is, of course, the Bracero coming across the bridge, and the only reason I show that is because I wish at the time now we were really able to kind of make this work again, because as you all know, as business owners, it's really hard to find people to work nowadays. So, we're always thinking, boy, we can just have the Bracero program back better 2.0, because I know there was some good stuff and bad stuff that came out of that Bracero program, but we just need something else to help create more jobs. And I ran past this picture looking through the archives, and I said, what, that really would be good if we can resurrect something like that again to help us employers, because that's one of our business obstacles is, thank you, is getting people to work here. So just final notes. MEDC basically has attracted over 709 companies to McAllen, created over 119,000 jobs, added more than 57 million square feet of construction in McAllen. And in Reynosa, 145 Maquila jobs were created. Played a major role in starting over 210 Maquilas, and you can ask Keith, he remembers every one of them. So we're also currently working with the city. Of course, we're hoping to get on San Luis Bridge open, get commercial traffic coming across there pretty soon, which is going to be a game changer for McAllen. These are just some of the companies that you'll find at Reynosa. Some of these names you'll probably see, they look familiar: Eaton, Nibco, Denso, Stanley Black & Decker, Panasonic. I'm sorry? Okay, yeah, you sold a lot of Alpine. Yeah, stereos. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, yeah, the Caterpillar, Corning, Eaton, Master Brand, Fujitsu 10, all of those are just a sample of some of the companies. A lot of people don't know that they're actually just right across the border. So just wanted to show you all that. And that's all I have. Thank you again. I'm sorry? Yes. Yes. Yeah, they are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right,
Yep.
so my check. All right, thank you so much can I get a round of applause to all of our panelists? And in the interest of time, I think we want to make sure we all get out of here by 9 o'clock. There was so much wonderful history shared. I just wanted to share, I think, a couple closing thoughts with you all. Working at the Museum of South Texas History for so long, we really take our mission, we bring it to every single thing that we do. And our mission at the museum is to preserve and present the history and heritage of South Texas and Northeastern Mexico. And if I can let you all know, our panelists know, that I think every single one of you is doing that. in a very big way. So Dr. Flores and getting everybody together like this really is an exercise in preserving the histories and presenting them to everybody, and each of you doing that by sharing. I think at the very end, I'm not sure if we want to do Q&A, just very, very brief. Okay, and I think I'm going to ask the audience, for everybody that's been here, can I please raise your hand if anybody has ever done business with the businesses mentioned today in any way or form? Yes, yes. Looks like the majority of the folks in here, including myself, we've all done businesses here in the city, business here in the city with, you know, the businesses done and shared today. And I think the one specific question, we can probably just go down the line, round robin, is how has McAllen specifically supported, affected your family business and your past? Right?
If it wasn't for McAllen accepting the foreigners, we would not be able to succeed. And I believe that the ability to use our culture and the culture that's in McAllen, and together it was blended, and they were able to work together. And McAllen accepted us because we were a part of their business also, because without us selling them clothes and my father fixing TVs and radios, they would have nowhere to go. And if it wasn't for the Khalifas, the Karams, and the Showerys, I don't think people would have been able to buy clothes and do all the things that they did back in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Those were years that McAllen, the population, remember, in 1950 was about 12,000, and then in the 60s it became 26,000. And when I graduated from high school, I don't think the population was over 30. And now we're almost at 1 million or close, 100,000. And the county
Count, it's like almost 200,000 by now, I believe.
And look at all the people that moved down here because of business. Business was so, when we were in the electronic business, there was only 2 stores selling stereos. We were one of them. And we brought electronics, hi-fi stereos to McAllen. And I can remember people driving in from Mexico, and they would shop in McAllen, and they would go to Showery Stereo. And then from Showery Stereo, they would go to Sahadi Foods, and then they would go to Khalifas, and they would go to different stores in McAllen. They would shop McAllen because we had something that nobody else had. And that's what made McAllen different. That's what made McAllen different from Bar, Mercedes, Mission, Weslaco, because we had business trade going on all the time. And since I was a little boy, my father and mother always taught us that you have to make sure that your client is number one. They're always right. They're always right. You always agree with them. And that philosophy stayed with me, and I believe that that's probably what made McAllen what it is, because of the business, the mercantile trade. Look at the shopping center. We were the first ones to build a shopping center in McAllen. The mall was what was something different. It was like we were in San Antonio or in a big city when that mall, and it kept growing and growing, and you could see the trade. When Mexico would come over here and they would spend their money here. And this is what made McAllen, their economic growth was because of Mexico. And I can remember that when Mexico's peso devalued and McAllen shut down completely. And I remember we had to let go some employees, and it was horrible that business had just, after we had built it up, we almost lost it. But without trade in McAllen wouldn't be where it is now. And I know the maquiladores have helped. The foreign trade zone has brought all these manufacturers to the valley, but they brought them to McAllen. They didn't go to Weslaco or Harlingen or Brownsville. They came to McAllen. You guys did a marvelous job. Our mayors were fantastic. Just keep the property taxes lower, and I think you'll have more people moving here. And I don't know what else to say except
Yeah.
McAllen is a place.
Just look at the National Guardsmen in 1916. When other cities said no, McAllen said yes. And I think that is like a catapult for McAllen. And McAllen is where it is because we truly believe that business is where it is.
And I want to point out
Fantastic.
that we went ahead and bought that bridge, right? Yeah. So buying that bridge, and later on, I guess along with Hidalgo, it just brought tremendous amount of commerce here. So, I mean, McAllen has always been visionary. It's always been visionary. Well, I know they're going to run us out of here, right? So I really appreciate you all doing this. And do you all think there's a good idea having the history of an area discussed and allowing people that are part of the commerce, the business community, tell us about that history? Do you think that is a good idea? That's something that we're thinking about doing in other communities. Do you think it's something that is worthwhile? So we appreciate you all. Thank you so much. Okay. I wanted to say, right, I have some students here who I told that if they stayed till the end, they could come and see me. I would need to get your names so that you can go and get credit for this, okay? So afterwards, if you could come and see me, I would appreciate it. You all have a good night. Thank you so much for coming. And yes. Thanks.